Okay. So we've done a lot with how do you simplify a rational expression, right? What's an expression versus an equation? What's an expression? What's missing in an expression that is there in an equation? Miguel? The equal sign, right. So now we're going to do it with equations. And I think where some of the confusion comes in today is, not that you'll be confused, you'll be great. But what you need to make sure you're thinking about is when there's an equal sign, I don't have to multiply the whole thing by 1 anymore, right? Because if I multiply the left side of an equation by 5, I can multiply the right side of the equation by 5, and I still have the same value, okay? So just keep that in mind when you're multiplying with equations. You don't have to multiply by 1. You don't have to multiply by y minus 2 over y minus 2. You can just multiply by y minus 2 as long as you do it to the other side. Remember golden rule of algebra? Whatever you do to one side, you got to do to the other. If you can remember that, you're in good shape. Okay, so we're going to solve some of these rational equations. You're going to really like method 1 because you've done it a million times and it's going to feel easy. The first way that we solve these is with cross multiplying. And sometimes it's not going to look like cross multiplying, but you can always turn it into cross multiplying with this basic setup. So just keep in mind, if you have a fraction equal to a fraction, you can always cross multiply to solve for your missing variable. Now, here's the thing. This isn't a fraction equal to a fraction, is it? Letter A. But how can you turn 2 into a fraction? 2 over 1. So if it doesn't look like a fraction, it's okay. Make it look like a fraction, okay? So treat this like 2 over 1, and now we just cross multiply. So it's 5 equals 8x. We're going to divide by 8 on both sides, and x will equal 5/8. Easy peasy, right? Cross multiply. All right, look at letter B. How are you going to do that? Do you have 2 fractions? No, but you can make 2 fractions, right? Put it over 1. Now we cross multiply. 3 times -1 equals -1 times x plus 2, right? We're just cross multiplying. Don't forget the parentheses when you cross multiply. So, yeah. It's this one that's negative. Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, you're right. It's Monday morning. Sorry, good catch. So 3 equals -1x or negative x minus 2. So add the 2 to both sides. And 5 equals a negative x. So divide by -1 or multiply by -1. And x will equal -5. Okay. What's a good way to check your answer on these? Plug it back in. If you just plug a -5 in here, 3 over -5 plus 2 should equal -1. 3 over -3 does equal -1. So you can always check these. Whenever it's an equation, you can check it. All right, you do letter C. Give that a go. See what you get. Do you guys want me to shut that blind? You cooking over there? It looks so angelic though. That's glowing. Don't worry if you don't get a nice number. This one's not a nice number. I mean, it's nice. It's just not the best. What'd you get? Is it positive or negative? It's negative. Negative what? 4.5, 9 over 2. I don't care which one you give. You're going to cross multiply this. So 1 times 3x minus 4 is just 3x minus 4. Cross multiply this, so this is 5x plus 5. I just distributed as I went, right? You already worked it out. So take away the 3x. You get 2x. Move this 5 over. You get negative 9. Divide by 2. So x equals either negative 9 halves is fine, or if you like negative 4.5 better, that's fine. You don't need to give me both. Pick one or the other. Okay. Getting a phone call. Okay, letter D. This one looks a little trickier initially. It's really not bad. What do you get? If we cross multiply this, what does that equal? Right, 5 times 50, so 250. And then just don't forget, when you're multiplying an x by an x, 10x squared. So we're going to divide by 10. And you get x squared equals 25. And then take the square root there. What do you get? 5. Does it equal 5? Plus or minus. You square rooted both sides. Plus or minus 5. So you could plug a positive 5 in there, you could plug a negative 5 in there, and you would get equal ratios. Questions on that? That's the easy one. Cross multiply, right? Okay, where it gets a little fancier, but more fun, if you ask me, is this second method. And with this one, you have to multiply by the LCD. Do you remember what LCD stands for? Least common denominator, okay? So we're trying to find a number that essentially is going to do us a big old favor by clearing all the fractions. We're trying to get rid of our fractions. So when you look at this setup, okay, notice we can't multiply, cross multiply anymore. A lot of people try to cross multiply right here. You can only cross multiply if it's a fraction equals a fraction. But now we have addition or subtraction that comes into play. So you cannot cross multiply, okay? Get that really ingrained. I cannot cross multiply. So instead, we're going to multiply everything by the least common denominator. You have a 2x, you have a 5x, and you have a 2. What's the least common denominator you can come up with? 10x, okay? So here's what happens. We take this whole thing, and we multiply everything by 10x. So here's how I'm going to write it. But essentially, it's just like you're distributing that 10x to everything. If it makes you feel better, you can always put a 10x on the right side and a 10x on the left side. That's great too. Just keep in mind here, it's tempting, God bless you, to multiply by 10x over 10x, because that's what we were doing in the previous lessons, right? You had to multiply by 1. This is what I'm saying. You don't have to multiply by 1 anymore because I'm doing it on both sides of the equation. I'm keeping it equal, okay? So multiply everything by 10x. Here's what you would get. You have, for this first one, 10x times 1, so 10x over 2x, minus, multiply this by 10x, you get 10x over 5x, and multiply the last one by 10x, you get 10x over 2. Okay, now look how nicely this plays out. 10x over 2x is what? 5. Minus 10x over 5x is 2. Equals 10x over 2 is 5x. Isn't that such a nicer problem to work with? 5 minus 2 is 3 equals 5x. So we just have to divide by 5, and you get x equals 3/5, or if you want to call that 0.6, that's fine too. And that's your answer. And again, you could plug it back in to check. It's going to be a little bit ugly trying to plug all that into your calculator, but you can. It will work. Yeah? We were looking for a number, the smallest number, that all three of those could multiply to, right? Your least common denominator. So the smallest denominator that works with all three of those numbers. So 2x and 5x and 2. The smallest number we can get from 2 and 5 is 10. And there's one x in those, so we have to get an x into all of them. Okay? Okay, so look at letter B here. What's your LCD? What's your least common denominator? It's not 4. There's x's there, right? 4x is going to be your least common denominator. So we're going to take this whole thing and we're going to multiply it by 4x, all 3 pieces. Okay, make sure you do all 3. So on top, you get 20x over x. Remember, you're just multiplying your numerator. We're not doing 4x over 4x. 4x times 3 is 12x over 4. And then 4x times negative 7, negative 28x over 4x. Now what? Simplify. 20x over x is? X divided by x is 1, right? So you just have 20 there. What's 12x divided by 4?
4x.
3x, right? And then negative 28x over 4x is? Negative 7. Just be careful with the x's. Sometimes people leave an x in where there shouldn't be an x. X divided by x is just 1, so get rid of that x. So if I take away 20 from both sides, I get 3x equals negative 27 divided by 3. So x should be negative 9. And again, if you want to plug that back in to double check it, you can always do that. Okay. I'm going to do C with you because there's kind of a new element to it. And then I'm going to have you try D on your own. So if you are a work ahead person, you're welcome to try that one by yourself. And then we'll do E together. So letter C, what is your LCD? X, right? It's the only thing in the denominator right now. So we're going to multiply everything by x. Okay, x times x is x squared minus x times 10 is 10x over x. X times negative 3 is a negative 3x. Now simplify. X squared we can't do anything with. 10x over x, your x's are going to 1 out. So you have x squared minus 10 equals negative 3x. Now, what do you do from here? What happens when that x squared and an x show up? We're going to factor it. It's a quadratic, right? So we need to move this 3x over. So you get x squared plus 3x minus 10 equals 0, right? If you have an x squared and an x, you want to set it equal to 0 and factor it. What does this factor to? What can you multiply to get negative 10 that you can add to get 3?
5 and negative 2.
5 and negative 2. So you get x plus 5 times x minus 2 equals 0. So what is x?
Negative 5 and 2.
Negative 5, positive 2, right? It's setting each of those things equal to 0. So x equals negative 5 and positive 2. Okay. Try letter D on your own. Figure out what is your least common denominator. Notice there's an x squared there. And see if you can work that one out real quick. What did you get?
Negative 2. I think it might be
2 and 4. Yep, 2 and 4. Did you get that? Okay, let's take a look. What's your LCD? If you're taking x squared, 4x, and 4 and trying to find the least common denominator that you can, that would be 4x squared, right? So you're multiplying everything by 4x squared. So you have 8x squared over x squared. equals 24x squared, when you multiply here, over 4x minus 4x squared over 4. Okay, so now simplify that. X squared over x squared is going to leave you with an 8. 24 over 4 is 6. X squared over x is going to leave you with 1x. And then 4 over 4 is just going to be minus x squared. So again, you have this x squared, you have this x. We're going to move everything over. So it's going to be a positive x squared minus 6x plus 8 equals 0. So when we factor that, what can you multiply to get 8 that you can add to get negative 6? Negative 4, negative 2, right? So x minus 4 times x minus 2 equals 0, which means your x's are just going to be opposite of what you see there, a positive 4 and a positive 2. Set each one of those equal to 0. Questions on that?
Does x squared need to be positive? Like, you can't move
You always want your leading coefficient to be positive in a quadratic like that. Yeah. Kind of messes everything up, because if it's not, then you would be factoring out a negative 1 on your first move, which just gets kind of ugly. So yeah, keep that leading coefficient positive. Okay, letter E. This one looks a little bit different because you have a plus on the left and you have a plus on the right, but it's still the same idea. You're still looking for the least common denominator. What do you come up with here? Let's just look numbers. You have a 4, a 3, a 3, and a 6. What are all those going to go into? Smallest number, 12, right? That's going to be 12. But then you have an x and an x, so you got to multiply by 12x if we're going to get those x's out of there. Okay, so least common denominator here is 12x. So we're going to distribute that. 12 times 7, that's 84 times x over 4x. 12x times 2 is 24x over 3. 12 times 5 is 60x over 3x. And 12 times 5 is 60x over 6. Okay, simplify. 84x over 4x is 21. 24x over 3 is 8x. 60x over 3x is 20. And then 60x over 6 is 10x. Okay, and now it's just a very basic algebra problem, right? Take away your 8x from both sides. You get 2x. Take away the 20 from both sides. You get 1. So 1 equals 2x. Divide by 2. That means x is going to be 1/2. Questions on that? Okay. We've got 12 minutes. We've got this. 4 more problems. And these ones are just a mixture. You got to decide what method am I using and solve from there. So look at letter A here. Which method works for solving this? Method number 1, cross multiplying, or method number 2, the LCD? Method 1, you're going to cross multiply this, okay? When it's a fraction equal to a fraction, cross multiply. So go ahead and do that. It would be 4 times x minus 2 equals, oh, hold up. What do you see here? You have a common denominator. If you have a common denominator, what's true of this? They're equal, right? I would totally do that right here. Here's the thing. You can do it this way. It's going to be a bit of a bear. It's not lovely because you're going to have to FOIL and you're going to end up with a quadratic. It's a lot of work. If you stop and take a look at the problem and see that I have a common denominator, then I can set my numerators equal, because if my denominators are equal, my numerators have to be equal. I would do that if I were you. So let's just do 4 equals x minus 1. All you got to do is add 1, and your x value is going to be 5 then. That's a whole lot nicer than having to do the quadratic. Also, if you did the quadratic way, you end up with 5 and 2. And if you plug a 2 back in, it doesn't work. So you would end up with an extraneous solution here, which who wants to look for extraneous, right? Okay, questions on that? So if you have a common denominator, set the numerators equal. Yes.
Can you go back to E? I just need.
Yes. Yeah, Jada.
Okay, thank you.
Right, because the denominators are the same, then your numerators have to be the same to be equal to each other, right? So you just set the numerators equal. Yeah. That doesn't happen a lot, but if it does happen, that's for sure an easier way to solve the problem. Yeah. Okay, letter B here. Which method are you using? Cross multiply or least common denominator? Least common denominator. You cannot cross multiply when there's 3 parts like this, okay? What is your least common denominator? It's 6. Okay, now here's the thing. You're gonna multiply all of this by 6, but when there's no x involved like this in our denominator, you're gonna be tempted to distribute everything. It's way easier if you don't distribute right now. Let me show you, okay? If I take 6 times 2x plus 1 over 6, your 6's are just gonna 1 out, right? If you distribute it, you can, but you're gonna end up having to do way more work to get the 6 out of there. So if I were you on these, I would not distribute right away. Just do 6 times x over 2, and then the last one, 6 times x minus 1 over 3. Like I said, if you want to distribute, you can. It's just more work, okay? If we don't distribute, when we go to simplify, 6 over 6 is 1, so we're just left with 2x plus 1, plus 6 over 2 is 3, so plus 3x equals 6 over 3 is 2, and now you can distribute that one because there's nothing else to simplify. So that's going to be 2x minus 2. Okay, and now again, basic algebra problem here. 2x plus 3x is 5x plus 1 equals 2x minus 2. Take away the 2x, you get 3x. Take away the 1, you get a negative 3 over there, and then divide by 3. So x is negative 1. Questions on that? Okay. 2 more, and then we're done. Were you done with that? Okay, letter C. We're trying to come up with a least common denominator. So it makes the most sense, just like in the last lesson, 8.5, we factored that first, right? So if I factor this n squared plus n, factor out an n, I'm left with n times n plus 1. So what is your least common denominator? It's not n squared.
And plus 1.
It's n times n plus 1, right? You have an n and an n plus 1, you have an n plus 1, you have an n. So if I want the least common denominator for all 3 of those, it's going to be multiplying everything by n times n plus 1. Okay, and again, don't distribute right away. If we lay this out, if I multiply 2 times n plus 1 over n, plus, now I'm going to take that n times n plus 1 and multiply by n plus 2. But again, don't distribute it, okay? Just write it out how you see it. N times n plus 1 times n plus 2 over n plus 1 equals, and one more time, negative 2 times n plus 1 over n times n plus 1. Do you see how this is so much nicer when you don't distribute right away? Now it's your n over your n is going to go away. So you can distribute that now. 2n plus 2 plus, now this n plus 1 and this n plus 1, because we're multiplying, we can get rid of those. We can slash those away. So you have n times n plus 2. I'm actually just going to distribute that right now. Is that okay with you? N squared plus 2n equals, and now your n plus 1 and n plus 1 are going to go away, and your n over n is going to 1 out also. So you're left with a negative 2 there. Lots going on, huh? Okay, so last thing is just now simplify this algebraically. You have an n squared, so I'm going to put that out in front. 2n plus 2n is plus 4n. Plus 2 equals negative 2. So if I add 2 to both sides, I get n squared plus 4n plus 4 equals 0. And now you just factor and solve. What can you multiply to get 4 that you can add to get 4? 2 and 2. So it's n plus 2 times n plus 2 equals 0. So what is n? Negative 2 and negative 2, which means it's just negative 2.
Would you have to do like negative 2 mult 2? Or...
No, you don't. Just negative 2 is great. How are we doing? Do you have the brain power for one more? We gotta move fast. Here we go. This one. If we factor x squared minus 9, that's x plus 3 times x minus 3, right? So this is gone. That's what we have. What is your LCD? X plus 3, x minus 3. So we're gonna multiply everything by x plus 3 times x minus 3. Again, don't distribute right away, okay? It's going to be, for this first one, x times x plus 3 times x minus 3 over x minus 3. Notice our denominator is not changing, okay? Your second numerator is going to look exactly the same, x times x plus 3 times x minus 3 over x plus 3. And then it's 2 times x plus 3 times x minus 3 over x plus 3 times x minus 3. Looks awful, but you're going to start slashing and it gets a lot simpler. So x minus 3 over x minus 3, x plus 3 over x plus 3, x plus 3 over x plus 3, x minus 3 over x minus 3. If you look at what we're left with, this is x squared plus 3x plus x squared minus 3x equals 2. And then from there, if you just solve that out, the 3x's are going to go away. You get 2x squared equals 2. Divide by 2. So x squared equals 1. What is your answer? Plus or minus 1. Yes, square root. You get x equals plus or minus 1.